Hello, everyone. As it is 11 or wherever you are in this time, 2 p.m. here on the East Coast, we will be getting started here. All right, so my name is Zach. I am the moderator for these webinars. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. I've done a lot of our hard work into this, and so without further ado, I guess we should let you know about this session. Today's session will be recorded, and this recording will be sent out to everyone registered afterwards. At the end of the presentation, there will be a survey. This link will be posted in chat. Additionally, it will be sent to each of your emails, and this will only go out to the people in attendance, though. On this survey, there will be an option for you to get a certificate of attendance for those of you who need CE hours. On it, there will be a list of different objectives and everything, so that way you can go talk to the people you need to get it to get your hours. If you need to leave midway into this session, please email me so that way I can keep record of it. And that way I can also kind of send you everything you need just in case. Otherwise, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email using the address of the email containing the link to this room that I sent earlier this morning. Otherwise, I'll also kind of post it in here in chat for everyone. In the meantime, I believe we can get started, and I'll start that off by introducing today's speaker. Today's speaker is Dr. Londa Nwadike. Dr. Londa Nwadike is a joint associate professor for Kansas State University and this University of Missouri. She serves as a state extension food safety specialist for Kansas and Missouri. This means she often works with county and district agents and other stakeholders in both states to develop programming and resources in food safety. These programs focus on consumers, produce growers, and farmers market vendors, and a lot of their issues they have. She grew up in South Dakota and is excited to return to the region with her family, but before moving to Kansas to serve her current appointment, she served as the Extension Food Safety Specialist for the University of Vermont. Before that, she has also worked for the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization, which is based in Rome, Italy, and she has extensive living and traveling experiences in Africa. However, for today, she'll be discussing the topic of food safety as related to freezing foods and a few other topics. I will leave the rest to you, Dr. Nwadike.
Great. Thank you very much, Zach. And thanks to all of you for joining today. I'm glad that you all could make it. We're really excited to be putting this summer webinar series together. Our North Central Region Food Safety Extension agents and educators and specialists from across the region, North Central region, have been working together the past few years to to do different things together. And so we decided to put on this webinar series together. And so that way we can hear from different specialists throughout the region, and hopefully we can really extend our learning. I do want to pull this up, and I did not get it larger before I started, but I'll just show really quickly. I'm going to share my screen to show you. I'm sorry, it's kind of small, but you could see that we have some upcoming webinars as well. So I want to make sure I mention them before I get into our topic for today. Again, sorry, it's a little bit small, but so our next session will be July 14, and that's 2 to 2:45 Eastern. So those of us in Central Time, it's 1 p.m. Central. And that'll be Dr. Betty Fang from Purdue University will be presenting that one. It'll be about food safety risks of low moisture foods and tree nuts. And then on August 5th from 1 to 1 p.m. Central, or 2 to 2 p.m., 2 to 2:45 p.m. Eastern, Dr. Julie Garden Robinson of North Dakota State University will be presenting, and she'll be talking about how you can reduce food waste and how we can, and still keeping food safety in mind, and dealing with food product dating and composting. So we have a lot of other great topics coming up this summer as well. And I I'm sure one of my colleagues will put the link in the chat to register if you do want to register for the other sessions as well, or if you want to share that with others of your colleagues also. So I'm going to stop sharing so I make sure that I don't, to make sure that I don't share something I didn't intend to share. So, so now I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Actually, you know what, before I share my screen, I'm going to share my poll so that I can, so that I don't forget to do our poll. So I just launched a poll, and hopefully you can mark your vote here. Just, you know, when we do webinars, it's always kind of nice to know who's in the room, who's here, even though we can't, you know, we can't see each other in person. We can still kind of know who's here. You've probably all done plenty of webinars by now, so you know how to vote. Looks like lots of people are voting. And unfortunately, Zoom only allows 10 responses in a poll. And we have 12 states in the North Central region. So I couldn't do, you know, each state separately. So I thought, well, I'll just have to group them. So, I'm gonna, lots of people are voting. Thank you. So most of the people here today are from Minnesota and Wisconsin. So great. And then followed closely by the Dakotas and then Kansas and Missouri. So, but we also have people, looks like, from lots of other states as well. Oh, sorry, I didn't share the results. Sorry about that. So now you can see the results. Sorry. So there's the results of who's here today. And I'm going to do the next poll now. And then this is just kind of to find out, you know, the type of people that are here. So if you don't mind, just out of curiosity, if you're with Extension or you're another type of educator, or if you are an Extension volunteer. So which one best fits you? This one, you can only vote once. You can't vote multiple times. So, and great, I see people are putting into the chat things that what they're doing if they're not on the list of the, you know, if they're kind of in that other category. So great, thank you very much. All right, I think I'm going to go ahead and end the polling here. So you can see, so most of the people here are Extension personnel. And then there are some volunteers as well. And then we have others, and I see them, WIC directors and adult and child care food program coordinators. So great to have all of you. We're glad that you all could join today. So, all right, let's stop sharing the poll. And I'm now going to share my screen here. Okay, so hopefully you can see that okay. But I bet it's not showing up in presenter mode. Okay, it's showing up in presenter mode okay now? Somebody want to give me a thumbs up or something? Okay. Yeah, great. Thank you, Karen. I was just going to call on you, in fact. So thank you. All right, great. So so now we're going to talk about our topic for today, you know, safe handling for fruits and vegetables. And, you know, this time of year is a time where we definitely have lots of great fruits and vegetable options locally. And, you know, we really enjoy having these fruits and vegetables available throughout the summer. So, so we're going to talk a little bit about why we're talking about food safety for fruits and vegetables today. And then we'll talk a little bit about just tips for buying produce. And we'll also talk about how to extend produce shelf life and quality. And then we'll talk a little bit about, you know, freezing produce as well. I won't talk today a lot about canning, but there are, of course, resources on canning available, and I'll refer to those as well. So, you know, and I know a lot of you are way more experienced in this area than I am. I'm a food safety person. I'm not a dietitian or a nutrition person, but I know that, you know, we all should eat more produce. You know, there's a lot of research that's been done showing that, you know, people that eat more fruits and vegetables are likely to have reduced risk of chronic diseases. So, you know, fruits and vegetables are they provide so many great nutrients, and they they don't provide, you know, a lot of fat, sodium, calories, which are things that our body does not need. So they're a great source of fiber, and man, they're delicious. So, you know, so it's really important that we eat a lot of produce. However, we also, in my area, I work in food safety. So we also need to, you know, understand that foodborne illness does happen. So, you know, many of you have probably seen these statistics many times, but, you know, we know that foodborne illnesses do happen. People get sick. And you know, the big thing is that it's highly underreported. You know, many of us have probably had some stomach upset or diarrhea. And it was, you know, and that might have been due to a foodborne illness. So, you know, foodborne illness can happen from any type of food. So this next slide talks a little bit about, you know, if foodborne illness is happening from produce or not. And we do see that there is an increase in produce outbreaks. And there's a number of reasons for that, and I'll kind of go through those. You can see the data here, and this data is a little bit outdated, but we can see that there's a trend that the number of produce-associated outbreaks is increasing. And again, there's a number of reasons for that. You know, our food system is changing a little bit. There's more pre-processed, bagged produce that's, you know, centralized, buying a bag of, you know, some name brand mixed salad, for example, salad greens. And, you know, there's also, again, an increase in produce consumption. People have more compromised immune systems, more virulent pathogens. So unfortunately, we do know that there is an increase in produce outbreaks. So foodborne illness outbreaks related to produce. So that's the second kind of issue that I wanted to bring up. First, we really should eat more produce. Second, you know, you can get foodborne illness from produce, unfortunately. And then the third thing I wanted to talk about just briefly, my colleague Julie Garden Robinson in August is going to talk more about this, but food waste is really a big problem in our society. You know, it's an estimated that 30 to 40% of our food supply is wasted, which is, you know, awful. I grew up on a farm myself, and I know how hard farmers work to produce food. I've worked in food processing facilities. I know how hard they work to process the food. And, you know, to think that 30 to 40% of that is just wasted is awful when there's so many hungry people. So, you know, we want to try to address all of these issues. So I got one more quick little graphic here before I get into more information. But, you know, when we think about, okay, we want to increase produce consumption, like I talked about, that's important. We also want to reduce food waste. That's important. We also want to make sure that we're addressing food safety. That's also important. So, you know, there's these three kind of separate issues going on here, but they're all interrelated. So what we're going to talk about today is kind of the things right here in the sweet spot there in the center, our smiley face of things that we can do that can increase produce consumption, reduce food waste, and also help ensure food safety. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. So the first thing I'll talk about is just when you're shopping. And this slide focuses a little more on farmers market shopping, you know, because that's something we do a lot this time of year. But, you know, this is also relevant to just shopping at a grocery store. But in particular at a farmers market, you know, they don't have the same vendor checking systems and so on in place. So, you know, you as a consumer, it's a, you know, one benefit of going to a farmer's market from a food safety perspective is you can talk to the producer. So you can ask them questions. You know, the thing is, we don't have, you know, my glasses don't give me the magic vision to be able to see germs. You know, we can't see them. So instead we have to use clues to help us see if there might be the potential for germs being there. You know, those clues are not perfect, but they're kind of just give us an idea of things that we should look for. So when you're looking for fresh produce, whether at a farmer's market or a store, you know, some of these tips might seem kind of, you know, obvious, but it's sometimes good just to remind ourselves, you know, especially things like tomatoes, you do want to avoid those with cuts or nicks because they could be, you know, that's where germs could more easily get in. Any other produce that you're buying, you do want it to be clean, looking fresh. You know, you don't want to buy produce that's on the ground. So at a farmer's market, if somebody's selling like watermelon, for example, you don't want to buy it if it's just on the ground, whatever that is. You'd want to see it up off of the ground, so it should be cleaner. If you're buying cut or peeled produce, whether it's at the farmer's market or at a grocery store, it needs to be just surrounded by ice. It should look cold and fresh. So that'll help ensure the safety of it. Again, at a farmer's market, you can talk to the vendor. You can ask about, look if they have any certifications. You can ask them about their practices. I won't go into detail on that, but we do have a resource that I'll share at the end. And I think Zach sent it out to anybody that requested more information this morning as well, that goes into more detail on that. So on the way home from the store or the farmer's market, you want to make the store or the farmer's market your last stop before going home. Don't, go to the grocery store, the farmer's market, and then go to the swimming pool. Go to the pool first and then go to the farmer's market. Keeping meat separate. I think a lot of us know that, but making sure that you're using a cooler bag if you're having anything that's cut produce. And just the thing I really do want to emphasize is just to ensure careful handling of the produce. I have 3 young kids myself. I have a picture at the end, and sometimes they're a little rough on things. And I have to remind them, like, not only does that bruise it and maybe it's not going to look as good. We won't want to eat it. That's where germs can get in if you cause a break in the skin. So, you just really want to be careful all the way through the chain that we're handling our produce as carefully as possible. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to share some slides from one of my colleagues who's a post-harvest physiologist. And so she really works with produce growers to help them to handle produce as safely as possible, and safely and as, to extend shelf life as much as possible. But this is also things that are good for consumers to think about as well. So the first thing I want to mention is that, when we think about fresh produce, after it's harvested, it's still alive. So it's not like it's, once it's off the vine, it's done. The produce is still alive, no matter what kind of produce it is. So it's still breathing, respiring, it's releasing heat. It can lose moisture really easily, and then so it can get sick and even die. So when I talk about these tips, we'll keep in mind the science behind it of why we're providing these tips, why they make sense to help keep the produce fresh and healthy and safe longer. So this slide has lots of numbers on it. I don't expect you to remember the numbers, but the thing that I want you to really take away from this slide is thinking about, like I mentioned in the previous slide here, produce does release heat. So even after it's harvested, it's still releasing heat. And so, we know that, it's releasing heat even when it's stored. And temperature has a huge impact on how much heat the produce is releasing. And so if produce is releasing more heat, that means its shelf life is shorter. So we want to reduce the amount of energy that's released from the produce. So the thing that you can see here is temperature has a huge impact on the quality of the produce, which is probably pretty obvious, but again, just kind of showing you the science behind why temperature has such a huge impact on the shelf life and quality of the produce. So you can see even between 32 and 41 degrees, 32 degrees definitely is better for a lot of produce. There's some it's not as good. I'll show that slide in a little bit, but for a lot of produce, the colder you can get it, the closer to freezing you can get it, the better. Out at 70 degrees, boy, that's producing a lot of heat. So you want to get things into the cooler as fast as possible to extend that shelf life. So this handout, and again, I think this was shared in the resources that Zach sent, and then I'll have the link for it at the end. But this handout just kind of clarifies it for consumers. Generally speaking, most consumers have 2 temperatures to store things. They have room temperature and they have refrigeration temperature. Most of us don't have like multiple refrigerators at different temperatures and cold storage areas. We can store it at the fridge or on room temperature. So this chart just shows where it's best to store things for safety and quality. The things that are listed in red are the cut fruits and cut veggies. So we know that those have to be in the fridge for safety. The other ones are really are mostly for quality purposes, for extending shelf life, to help reduce food waste and to improve our consumption. If food looks better, tastes better, we're going to eat more produce, and that's one of the goals too. So again, this will have this fact sheet available to you later, but this gives you an idea that some things it's better to store it at room temperature for quality purposes. Again, this picture just shows some of my colleagues' research showing things like broccoli. And I think it's probably most of us, generally speaking, know, okay, I got to store broccoli in the refrigerator. But you can tell if broccoli is stored at room temperature, it doesn't look very good. So this is 2 days of storage at room temperature versus in the fridge. But there's a huge improvement in just the desirability of that broccoli if you store it in the fridge. So I'm more likely to eat it because it looks better and it'll taste a lot better too. So just to emphasize why temperature is so important. And this slide shows the produce that actually is injured by too cold of storage temperature. So again, this is for quality purposes and shelf life. And I remember when I was a kid, we'd pick beans and put them in the fridge, and that'll help extend the shelf life. But really, if it's possible, it's better to store your beans at 45 degrees. Most of us, again, don't have a 45-degree cooler, but just to let you know that that's why those little brown spots can show up on beans if you store them in the fridge. It's from chilling injury. So things like eggplant here, you can see kind of has pitting on the outside, and that's from it being stored in too cold of conditions. So again, things like pumpkins, hard squash can actually get damaged by storing it in too cold of conditions. So these things won't cause problems from a safety perspective. They're still safe to eat, but it's just going to be less desirable. But beans, we would recommend that you store them in the fridge, but just so you know that's why you might see some brown spots on them if they're stored in that cold temperature for longer. It's because of chilling injury. By the way, if there's questions, you can type them in the chat and I can take them at the end, but please feel free to jump in if you have questions. Water loss is really important as well. If you're losing water, I think we've all seen lettuce that looks like that, and it's really not appealing. Like, I had some in my fridge not too long ago, and unfortunately got put in the compost because it just wasn't appealing anymore. We're not as interested in eating it. You can also lose, water soluble vitamins. So vitamin A and vitamin C are water soluble. If you lose that water, those vitamins also are not available anymore. So how to control water loss is controlling the humidity, which I'll talk about in a minute, and then lowering the temperature of storage. So that's what I talked about earlier. Temperature is so important. And then using protective packaging, which I'll talk about after I talk about humidity. So some refrigerators do have humidity control drawers. Mine at home does not, but some do. I know ours here in the office does. This is from the Natural Resources Defense Council, but some produce is better to store in high humidity, and then some is better to store in low humidity. So, if you have 2 drawers in your fridge, one for high humidity and one for low humidity, maybe you can group them and put all the broccoli and Brussels sprouts and carrots and cauliflower together in the high humidity drawer, and then have a low humidity drawer that you can use to store apples and grapes and mushrooms, etc. So that's another way that you can help to control the humidity and to help to extend the shelf life of your produce. So reducing water loss, that's why you see lettuce wrapped in packaging. I'll talk a minute more about that in a minute, but that will really help to reduce that water loss because it's not going to just evaporate into the environment. At grocery stores, you'll see misting systems, and that's why they have those too, is to help the fruit or vegetables not to lose water. And then this is just packaging beans to control that water loss so that you're not exposing it to the environment, especially if there's a fan on the produce, then it can really, or if there's air movement, then the water can really evaporate and you're going to end up with not as appealing produce. So you do have to watch out when you are storing produce that you're not storing it in airtight containers because like I talked about in that slide earlier, produce is still breathing after it's harvested. So you do want to store it in a container that's maybe if you have a plastic bag from the grocery store or whatever, maybe poke some holes in the bag with a pin, to make sure that there's some ways for the produce to breathe, but you're mostly covering it up to help to reduce that water loss. So, and you can buy different kinds of bags that are helping with that will help to control water loss, but also will help allow it to breathe. So you want to make sure that it's not airtight so it can breathe, but that you're covering it to help reduce water loss. This next one is maybe kind of obvious, but if you have things like strawberries in your fridge, you should eat them first because they have a shorter shelf life. At our house, that's not a problem. The kids eat it just like that. So apples have a longer shelf life, so you can save those for later. Another important tip is to make sure that your storage area is clean. And wherever your produce is touching, that it's clean, because any germs that are on the surface can cause decay and mold, which can just shorten the shelf life, but can also cause, people to get sick as well. So, and if there is a spoiled apple, it's true that one spoiled apple does ruin the whole bunch. So, if there is a spoiled apple or spoiled whatever it might be, spoiled strawberry, make sure you remove that so that those mold spores or whatever might be there, that it doesn't spread to the other produce that's next to it. A few other tips for handling produce safety. Again, some of these are probably, we all know them, but just a reminder, always wash your hands before handling food. Then talking about washing, all produce that has not already been washed, you do want to make sure that you wash it just before eating. So not when you get home from the store, but just before you eat it, because that will also extend the shelf life. We want to keep that shelf life as long as possible. We do want to make sure, even things like bananas, in that picture, the outside the banana, I mean, most people don't eat banana peels, but if the peel touches something else, I don't think most people pack their lunch like this, but if the peel touches something else, it could contaminate whatever it's touching, or your hands. Things like cantaloupe, you do want to wash with a produce brush because it's got all those that netted rind, the nooks and crannies in there can really harbor germs and bacteria. So you want to get in there and get germs out. If you buy pre-washed produce, so baby carrots is a classic example. If it says it's already been washed, you don't need to re-wash it because it has been washed. The problem is a lot of people their sink might not be very clean. And so if you're washing it in your sink, you could actually be recontaminating it because if your sink is dirty, water is bouncing from the sink onto that produce, and it could actually recontaminate your produce. So the best way to clean your produce is just with clean running water. During COVID, we heard lots of things about washing your produce with all sorts of things. But the data shows that soap or produce wash is not needed. And the safety has not been really evaluated for people to consume those things. So clean running water, really, the research has shown that it's the best way to handle your produce. So just clean running water is what we recommend to wash with. A few other things on the handling, and then we'll go to freezing. Once you cut or peel your produce, you do need to make sure you refrigerate it within 2 hours. I mentioned, cut fruits and vegetables need to be kept in the fridge. Once you've cut it, keep it in the, make sure it gets in the fridge within 2 hours. Store your produce above your raw meat or raw eggs in the fridge. Again, keeping things clean, using separate cutting boards. Those are all things we kind of have already talked about. So the last topic I'm going to talk about before we go into question and answer is freezing produce. So, freezing produce for later use is something that's a great idea because you might not be able to eat it all now, so you can also eat it later if you freeze it. Again, canning is another option, but I'll just we have other resources on that. But some produce will reduce its quality after freezing. Things like potatoes, they'll get kind of watery if you freeze them, but you could use that in a casserole or something like that. You might not want to eat it plain, but you could use it in a casserole because the quality will be reduced. The safety is still fine, but the quality might be reduced. So just keep that in mind. Always using freezer safe containers is important. to make sure that you're using something that will help preserve it for the quality for longer. Reusing bread sacks or whatever it might be, those aren't really designed for long-term use. You do want to use containers that are designed for long-term freezer use. Foods that are stored at 0 degrees or less than 0, which is what we would recommend you keep your freezer at, are safe indefinitely. However, the quality might reduce. So, whatever level of safety the product went into the freezer at, that's what level of safety it will come out at. It's not necessarily going to improve or decrease, but if it was safe when it was put in, it will be safe when it comes out. But there's going to be there might be some freezer burn, and there might be, a lot of ice crystals, and it just won't be as good of quality. So generally speaking, we recommend 8 to 12 months in the freezer as a maximum for quality purposes. This fact sheet, and again, I think this was in the resources that Zach sent out this morning. This fact sheet this one's from K-State. We do have a listing in there of produce. At the top there is breads and pastries, but later there's a section on produce, and that gives recommendations for how long to store things in the fridge and the freezer related to produce. So one other thing I'll mention with freezing produce, many vegetables should be blanched before freezing for the best quality. If you put broccoli or spinach just into the freezer raw, it's not going to be very good quality when it comes out. But if you blanch it, which is just quick cooking it, then it will be much better quality when it comes out. I know I always go to the National Center for Home Food Preservation at the University of Georgia. Their website is there on freezing to know quickly, I want to freeze, tomatoes, or I want to freeze turnips or whatever. How do I do that? So that website's a great resource. These resources here are from K-State and the University of Missouri Extension on canning as well as freezing. So those are just great resources that you can go to for freezing as well as canning. So a few more resources here. NDSU has our regional center that shows they have a lot of great resources from all 12 states on home food preservation. Again, there's the University of Georgia freezing foods one. And here is a number of other resources that I mentioned. The produce storage guide that's at the bottom of this page here. We have some fact sheets on reducing food waste. And I think we can make this presentation available if you're interested in getting all these links as well. So, and one more, here's my contact information. There's our websites. Our K-State website is listed there, as well as our University of Missouri website. And I'm just going to show a quick picture of my kiddos and my husband, and I need to send a quick text to them. My son has to go to a birthday party, and I gotta coordinate that a minute, but I will be happy to take questions here. And I think I saw some questions coming in, so I'm gonna stop sharing.